Everyone is ignoring these signals that we've seen several times within the cycle, and I feel like I'm going crazy because Bitcoin is perhaps about to repeat history yet again. And in today's video, I'll be going over those signals and what they mean and what to kind of expect over the next few months of price action. Anyways, as always, we will begin this with some daily price statistics. So just talking about the very, very short term here. Of course, looking at Tuesdays, it's more or less a coin flip's probability, whether it's likely to close positively or negatively since this bull market began in 2023. However, we are most interested in the average gains for positive and negative closing Tuesdays, which do seem to offer up a pretty high degree for a nice little range for the day. And in this case, we can see the bottom side of that range with an average loss of 1.77% would put Bitcoin somewhere around 108,250. You can almost see a wick down to that number already, quite close to it, and Bitcoin already kind of bouncing from there. So if you were looking for the scalp bounce play, I think that that's kind of already playing out right now, and the next test, perhaps less efficacious in that way. To the upside, we do see about 112,500. So if Bitcoin were to rally up to about 112.4 or 112.5 region, anywhere around there, I would be looking for at least a little bit of a pullback on that first attempt. But this is all very, very short-term time frame stuff. I really want to get into the higher-term time frame stuff to answer the sort of insinuation at the beginning of this video, which is everyone's ignoring these signals. Now, is everyone ignoring these signals? Obviously fucking not. It's just YouTube clickbait bullshit sort of title. But I do think that there are some very important things that it seems that the market in general, as we're all stuck in our own little echo chambers, is not necessarily aware of or not really paying attention to. Now, from what I interpret in the market, through social media venues, everyone's kind of convinced that not everyone, but most people are convinced that this is just an up-only bull market. Interest rates are about to come down, which means that markets must go up, which, they probably will come down. But if we do look historically over the past 40 years, any times that interest rates have actually been going lower, the initial move was a shock downside move, followed by, yes, long-term massive upside, which actually I do think can definitely happen here. But in the short term, things can get nasty. So I want to bring you back to a few of the setups that we've been looking at over the past 3 weeks now. Maybe it's even more than 3 weeks. We've seen several of them fire off. We've seen the 12-hour, the daily, the 2-day, and now the 3-day is firing off, which is probably going to bleed into even higher term timeframes. What I'm talking about here is the interplay between the red moving average and the yellow moving average. When the red moving average crossed the downside of the yellow moving average, we've seen a minimum correction to the green moving average across all of those time frames on a very consistent schedule since this bull market began in 2023. It's been a very, very accurate signal for an impending correction, with the current sort of upwards momentum likely waning for the short and medium term and likely playing out, a nice corrective phase. So in this case, you can see if I go back to the 12-hour time frame, that was what initially kind of gave us the bias towards this correction emerging back on over here in end of July. Then the daily time frame fired off a little bit after that. Yes, Bitcoin did get a rally in between. We've seen that before, but ultimately it did make its way back down to that green moving average, which gave us a target down to 114. Then recently, the 2-day time frame that we spoke about on last Friday's video had fired off with that same setup right here. Bitcoin has now fulfilled this test. And again, here are the historical results of it. I probably should have shown this for all of these other ones, but yeah, there you go. And while this one has been hit, and while that green moving average has been a minimum target, in some cases we do see it slump lower than that over time. So, generally the first move into it should be at least a bit of a bounce and at least a bit of sideways. It doesn't usually fall right through. For example, if it is going to fall through later, it usually looks something like this, where it comes down to it, bases for a while, and then boom, okay, overshoots. In other cases, it just has a nice little quick downside move, boom, and back up. Very, very nice, very, very painless, and the general upside resumes. But I don't think that this is one of those cases. Now, if we fast forward to the 2-day time frame now on CME, this one is also firing off, as you can see, as of last night's closure. And guess what? That one has a minimum target down here to the green moving average. And again, looking at the backtest results throughout this past bull market, this one hasn't been as good as spot price action. But again, we don't really care about the results of this. We care about just that minimum target. Doesn't necessarily need to get there, perfectly. My point is, this is not a trade setup. This is for directional analysis on YouTube. If you don't understand that point, you're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry, but I've tried to illustrate this many times. Sorry, you're not a fucking idiot. You just don't know any better. But yes, understand that YouTube analysis very, very different than real trading analysis. For YouTube, I like to focus the videos on general direction because that's what I figure most people are interested in, and also what I'm also most interested in as more of a long-term investor when I put on that sort of lens. So yeah, look looking at it right here, that one did officially happen last night on the 2-day timeframe closure for CME. So we do expect to move down around this 55 EMA, the green moving average right here. Again, this has happened every time, even if it did not happen in a profitable manner. The question is, do we get a rally in between? I'm very much open to that. Of course, Bitcoin right now is coming off of the weekly 21 EMA. It's usually a good time to bounce, generally speaking. In past cycles, it has been a really good basing point, but in this cycle, it actually has not, to be fair, except for really the last corrective phase that we saw here in June, where it wicked down ever so slightly and then back up. It's not like past cycles where, Bitcoin was putting in mega higher lows around this region. In fact, if you've been looking at that for this cycle, then you have been massively misled. Anyways, going back to it over here, this is the 2-day time frame for CME, which obviously is a little bit, more relaxed than spot price action. But now, not only is the 2-day time frame signaling for likely lower prices. Again, the time frame of this, we don't fucking know. Probably less than 2 weeks, maybe sooner rather than later. Again, we don't know. I'm not making a comment on that. Could easily see a short-term bounce for Bitcoin coming off of the weekly 21, of course. But that minimum target would be about 106,750. This is CME, of course, so it does have a slight premium over spot price action. Let's call it, a few $100. So maybe that puts Bitcoin spot, somewhere into the low 106s region. But here's the thing. The 3-day time frame is now following through for spot price action. So you can see how one setup bleeds into the next, which bleeds into the next, which bleeds into the next. And the 3-day time frame right here, technically speaking, has not fired off just yet. But you can see that the red moving average has crossed the underside of the yellow moving average. So this one will technically be confirmed if Bitcoin does remain below, especially about $113,500 by the next closing period, which won't be for another 2.5 days. So, a lot can happen, obviously, but as of right now, and as long as Bitcoin is below that price, correction lower remains the most likely thing. Maybe there's a short-term rally in the in the very short term around these numbers. That's fine, but as long as Bitcoin continues to remain below these numbers, the likelihood of this correction continuing onwards and southwards is very high. And again, you can look at the past results over here. It always gets down to that green moving average. Just, it's not always going to be profitable. So again, this is not a trade setup. It is directional analysis. And if we go to the strategy tester right here, it's happened 5 times on this time frame for this cycle, and more or less been fine. But anyways, that target would be down actually closer to the CME 2-day timeframe target, which is rather interesting. That's 106,400 as of the current moment. Again, that's a minimum target. It can overshoot. In fact, of the 5 times we have seen this play out, it's overshot every time except for once. So actually, I guess kind of likely to overshoot. So that brings the question, okay, if it does overshoot, what are we likely looking at? What's sort of like the main area of interest here? And I think the main area of interest now is starting to become very, very, very clear. The 5-day time frame is also in jeopardy of getting the same cross. Now, it is admittedly much further away. This will extremely unlikely happen on this next period. If it's going to happen, it's probably going to be the period after that. So this is still like 7 days away at minimum between these actually officially crossing. But these do converge very, very quickly on this time frame. For example, the last closure to the current closure converged by about almost $2,500. So yeah, in about 2 closures, if Bitcoin's still below here, especially, that will happen. And then this green moving average right here becomes the corrective target. And by the way, this green moving average on this time frame, the 5-day time frame, has accurately gotten the lows of pretty much every corrective phase during this cycle. So that seems to be the flavor of the cycle. And when the cycle is continuing to play something out over time, it's usually a really, really good signal. So in this case, that would be just below $100,000 as of right now. I think anywhere around there is fine. But again, that's much further out. So please understand, I'm not saying that that's happening today or tomorrow or even this week or even next week. We all have such a short time frame preference for what happens. We think like a month-long worth of analysis is destroyed by literally 1 minute of a $500 or $1,000 move to the upside or the downside. It doesn't change fucking anything. It really doesn't. You have to pay attention to the higher term timeframes if you want directional analysis. If not, you better be trade on the lower term time frames, because you're just going to fucking destroy your mind doing that and think that things are collapsing or catapulting with each and every floaty moment. Anyways, again, that would be around about $100,000, and I do think that is going to become a relevant corrective target. Again, confirmed if Bitcoin essentially just remains below about $111,000 in the next 7-day period. So between now and next Tuesday or next Monday, whatever it ends up being. Anyway. anyways, moving on from there, I do want to get into a few other major signals that I think, combine with this. So the weekly time frame over here for Bitcoin, looking at the MACD indicator, has also had a very, very consistent corrective signal here throughout this cycle. Anytime we've seen the weekly MACD cross to the downside, this has preceded major corrective periods that go on for a long period of time. And why am I bringing this up? Because it's happening yet again over here. Yes, technically it is not confirmed as of this exact moment. It will take until the end of this week. And if Bitcoin is still below, according to Careticker's MACD reverse calculation, 116,000 US dollars, then yes, it will officially cross the downside. And I've marked off all of the other times we've seen it cross the downside throughout this cycle. And you can see that these were actually coming after, the major high and leading into a deeper correction for a long amount of time. I will measure out this one over here, and I'm going to measure from the time that we got the signal to, and also go over like how low it went, which this one went low about 27.25%. And then we'll measure to the time when Bitcoin actually made a new high. In this case, it took 105 days from that initial signal to Bitcoin getting back up towards that prior high and making it ever so slightly new high. Very nice. This one over here that we saw in 2024 led to a correction from that signal of about 24% almost, until the next time that actually re-challenged the high and made new highs, 189 days. Long time. And then, of course, we have this one over here. It initially fired off when Bitcoin was trading, I don't know, like $28,000. Doesn't come down that much lower, finally getting a low about almost 12%, a little bit lower, so not that crazy. But again, from the time that Bitcoin initiated that signal to the next time it actually made a new all-time high, or sorry, not a new all-time high, but a new high for the cycle, was about 147 days. So this took a long time. That's what I'm trying to kind of illustrate right here, that the likelihood of this correction just being one and done immediately is very low, assuming that this week finishes the week below 116, and especially if Bitcoin's below some of the numbers that we spit out earlier for those setups, that just makes this whole thing go a little bit faster, I suppose. But putting this into perspective, with this signal just freshly firing off right here, and realizing that none of the other signals took less than 100 days to get back to, to new highs on the cycle, that could put us out into the very last month of this year, like November, December, maybe very late November at the earliest to December, a little bit more likely, maybe even all the way into January. And I actually think that will happen. And I actually do think that we will see upside resolve from that area as well. I think that the cycles are changing very obviously for reasons that we spoke about during the Fibbo Swanee interview, and also just reasons that I've said many times on this channel. We have demonstrable and verifiable cues that this signal is in fact different. And it makes sense that it's different as well. We have different players in this market right now. On top of this, we do see that there is, the old rising wedge right here. If you're looking at the price action pivots indicator, and this does have an implied target based off of the resolution of it. I already have it drawn out over here, but that's basically directly in alignment with the weekly yellow 21 EMA. That's around 107-ish region, give or take. So, does Bitcoin make a quick stab down around there intra-week and then bounce? I think that's definitely possible. Again, in the short term, I'm very much open to Bitcoin bouncing. I don't think it's going to be a straight shot down here, just to put it fucking bluntly. But, with this very likely crossing, I don't think that there's any major rush into long-term positions. And I mean, unless you just want to buy here, I do think that you will get lower prices. And again, the minimum correction that we've seen from this signal, like from the literal signal firing off to the next low, was about 11 or 12%. That was the minimum. The other one's coming in around like, deep 20s. So if we were to go 12% down from this signal, that brings you to about $100,000. So that would be kind of, least of the worst case scenarios, I suppose. If we were to go, 20% or more, that puts Bitcoin, low 90s. Possible, yes, but it's not my first target. So I don't want to get, misheard here that Crown says it's going tonight. It's like, shut the fuck up. No, understand it's one thing at a time. If you can't understand these things, turn off this channel, because honestly, it's just, you go somewhere else where they're going to tell you it's only going up or only going down. I'll tell you that right now, because I don't want to fucking deal with it. Anyways, yes, moving on from there. It's not my damn problem. Moving on from there, I do want to also acknowledge that all higher term timeframe stochastic momentum oscillators are positioned to the downside right now, all of the ones that really matter for long-term trend. And again, on the weekly time frame right here for CME, we've seen a very consistent signal throughout this cycle that has indicated major corrective phases. We see this sort of like double hump here, the double hump, the double hump, the double hump, this one a little bit lower, and then the double hump again. And these have all come preceding major long-term corrective phases, all the ones that we spoke about earlier. So we see good confluence between these different signals here. These LARP lines, by the way, that is not what I'm saying is going to happen. I mean, it's possible that it does happen, but that is not like, it's not like a fucking, hey, that's exactly what I think is going to happen. I don't know. I don't know what sort of paths and twists and turns it's going to take. But ultimately, you know, I do think that it does take a longer time to correct. And I do think that it does come lower overall. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this week, maybe not even this month, but, you know, within the next 2 to 3 months. And again, this is within the context of very, very low BBWP representing volatility, which is where all these other signals, you know, fired off too. And so looking at this right here, like, yes, this will have a downside bias as long as Bitcoin's below 121,300. There's also bearish divergence on these timeframes as well. And it doesn't just stop here on the weekly timeframe. The bi-weekly timeframe is coming down as well, freshly from the same high levels that we have seen on these major corrective phases, showing a downside bias as long as Bitcoin's below 113,800. On top of this, we can go to the monthly time frame. The monthly time frame will actually remain to the upside here. Again, we're coming into the end of this month of August in the next like 4 or 5 days. So I'm very curious to see where this number comes in to open up on September. If this starts to turn down, then I become a lot more worried overall. But as long as this one's up, I think that there's still some hopium. Of course, we haven't spoken about the bi-monthly time frame in a long time, but this actually could be a big fucking problem for me. I completely did not even put this on my on my board here on my notes. Yeah, this could be a real problem if it does come down. 111,900 is the pivot, and actually all prior market cycles have actually ended on that signal. Again, I actually don't think we're going to get a bear market cycle that you've seen in past market cycles. I think that you're going to get like, you know, just a very long sideways and down. Probably going to be much less of a drawdown than 70%. I think it's probably, you know, maybe at most, in my opinion, it's going to be like 50%. But again, I think it's going to be more time-based rather than price-based, to be honest. But yeah, as it stands right now, yeah, if that does turn to the downside, which will confirm in 5.5 days, with the closure of August, then, you know, again, I'm going to be looking for a much longer corrective period, at least reconnecting with that red moving average, which is about $97,000 as of right now. But what I really meant to do is I meant to go to the 3-week time frame. So the monthly kind of is the odd man out here. The 3-week time frame is also freshly crossing the downside. Again, all crosses that we've seen to the downside in this critical zone right here have correlated with these major highs throughout this current cycle, and also, you know, from cycles prior as well. You know, with corrections down minimum to the yellow moving average, which right now is about $92,000. That will rise up, but this one remains downside angled as long as you're below 119,300, which seems rather likely to me right now. Now it's got another 19 days left to go in this period, but, you know, as long as you're below there, like, it's, you know, the signals continue to compound. That's kind of the picture that I'm painting here. On top of this, the weekly time frame for the HBDR indicator has lost the median as of last week, officially for the first time since a long time, to be fair. And all of the corrective phases within the cycle have been marked off by that as well. I'll just mark them off right there. Boom. Or that actually wasn't even correlated to it, but you get my point. Don't want to spend too much time here because this chart seems to confuse more people than it helps. But if you get that chart, the HBDR indicator, honestly, is probably the most powerful. It's like single indicator that we do have. But yeah, looking at the weekly RSI, again, another just major signal here. 1, 2, 3 drives of bearish divergence on these weekly highs throughout this whole cycle. That is how prior cycles actually have finished, or at minimum initiated some major corrective phases. You know, this one ended over here, 1, 2, 3, boom. This, the one before that, actually coming off of the Rona dump high, before the Rona dump high, 1, 2, 3, boom. It's like, how do they know? Over here in 2017, 1, 2, 3, boom. Over here in 2013, 2014, you got 1, 2, boom. And then, you know, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Anyways, my point is that, you know, for the people who think that Bitcoin's going to do this, like just straight V bottom from here, I hope that that's what happens. Personally, I'll still hold Bitcoin no matter what, but I don't think that that's what's happening, man. I think that that's less and less likely. Okay, we're talking about probabilities here. When we weigh up all of these things, if I have to bet on a direction, it will be to the downside. Again, this is coming within the context of very, very low volatility. So a move is a brewing, and the 2-week time frame has the same thing. In fact, another drive populating right here. And the monthly time frame is going to have 1, 2, 3 drives, with this one really looking like another swing high right here. So, I do think that we're heading into a corrective time. I understand that people think that Q3 of any year has to be bullish, which is just simply not true. We've seen not bullish Q3s many times in Bitcoin's history. I mean, shit, people are also fucking getting on my case about saying August is likely to be down because August after the halving always needs to be bullish. I don't believe in these things. And I think that this is, unless if the next 5 days rallies up to, $125,000, I think that will be, vindicated there. Again, stats are fucking stats. Numbers are fucking numbers. I'm not making any sort of emotional analysis about these. I'm just presenting the fucking numbers as they are with a little bit of my own emotions, to make it fun. But my point is that I'm not like taking joy in saying that, hey, it's probably going to correct, for a while, or at least be sideways for a while. I mean, obviously, it's just easier when things go up. No shit. But long term, I do think that, there is still some hopium after things cool off for a bit. Anyways, I think that we've gone through pretty much everything that I wanted to get through here. Maybe let's just quickly look at the bi-monthly. Does this one have any signals? I haven't even checked. No, not yet. So yeah, we shall see. Anyways, like I said, all of this was really focused on the very long term. We're probably talking about the next 3 to 4 months looking out. So this can take a long time to play out. In the very, very short term, do I think that Bitcoin can bounce? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not super focused on that right now. Betting on a bounce on the first pass on the yellow 21 EMA on the weekly time frame is usually not a bad bet. But like I said, I just don't think that that's going to be the move unless if by some act of God before the end of this week, you see Bitcoin reclaim like $116,000. Until then, I think you can probably glean my own thoughts from this. The numbers are what the numbers are. And I think that's a good place for me to be leaving off on this particular video, probably a little bit longer of a video than way longer of a video. While we are here, and now that I know that only the fucking true TA nerds are staying until the end of a video like this, I do want to let you know that in less than a week, I'm going to produce a massive upgrade for this program right here, the Trade Like a Quant program. Right now, it is just focused on sort of informational how-to theory of quantitative analysis and quantitative trading strategies. What I'm going to do is I want this to be my sort of penultimate program where I put just fucking everything. I just want to pack everything in. I want to reduce and consolidate all of my prior informational programs, which there's not that much to be fair. But I want to have them all in just one place. I don't want to be having like a bunch of different fucking programs. I don't care about that. What I want is a nice legacy project here. So as of right now, yes, it's only quantitative analysis. Starting September 1st, I'm going to add in all of my options content, all of my trading psychology content, and all of my classical TA content as well. So this price will actually double, or at least double, I'll say, because it will go maybe a little bit up over time, depending upon a few different things. Anyways, my point is this is the lowest price that you're going to ever see this ever. So I do want the people who are sticking around during this time when really only true TA nerds, true fucking crazy people like myself are actually even paying attention to this goddamn asset. Know that because after that the price will be risen. The price will be risen, and it ain't going back. And yeah, I mean, we'll have discounted periods as well. Starting next week, it'll be my birthday, so we will have a discounted week for that as well. But the price objectively or in practice will be higher, even with that upcoming sale period. Yes. Anyways, okay, that's enough shilling for today. I hope that this came across well. I hope that I expressed my ideas properly here. Let me know if that made sense. Let me know if it didn't make sense. And yeah, I think that's where we leave off. As always, I want to wish everyone the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow, Wednesday, for another live stream.